Good evening and welcome to The Breakdown with me, Toni Waterman. Here are the big topics we'll explore tonight. Hot, hot, hot. We dive headfirst into insurance-linked securities. Billions of dollars are being raised, and Bermuda is at the center of it all. But with fresh competition on the horizon, we'll find out what the island needs to do to stay on top of its ILS game. Plus, the race for space has gone commercial. We'll take a look at the role Bermuda can play in the $400 billion industry.
Well, space may be the final frontier, but here on Earth tonight, we're going to be talking about one of the hottest trends in the insurance industry and one that Bermuda really dominates in. I'm talking about insurance-linked securities. Please do not change the channel. I know that may sound like a snore fest, but I guarantee you this is a very dynamic, very interesting conversation. You know what we're going to do by now. We're going to break it down for you. But first, Gary Foster Skelton took to the streets of Hamilton for your take.
What are insurance-linked securities?
Absolutely no idea.
I have no idea.
I have no idea.
No clue.
No idea. No idea.
I have absolutely no idea.
I have no idea.
I've asked several people who are in the insurance industry and even they don't know, but they don't want to be caught on camera admitting that.
Insurance-linked securities?
Yeah. No idea.
Yeah, I have no idea.
I would say that it's either like stocks or bonds that are connected to insurance companies, basically.
All right, so it seems like a couple people out there still haven't wrapped their heads around necessarily what insurance-linked securities are, but that's okay. Let's go ahead and break it down. All right, so in a nutshell, insurance-linked securities are just another way for the insurance industry to diversify their risk and to raise capital. So how do they do that? Well, they take some of that risk and they bring it to the capital markets where you have investors that buy it. These are investors like hedge funds, pension funds, asset managers, retail investors like you and I. We can't really get our hands on this stuff directly. So let me give you an example here. And you know what? Let's have a little fun. Why not, right? So this is Waterman's Insurance. They sell property and casualty insurance, but that comes with a bit of risk, right? Because there can be a massive earthquake, a hurricane, a landslide that's going to cause a lot of damage. And then guess what? Waterman's is on the hook for some pretty hefty payments when it comes to those claims. So what does Waterman's do? Well, it's a pretty smart company, if I may say so myself. It's going to take some of that risk and it's going to push it into the markets in the form of what are known as catastrophe bonds, cat bonds. So this is really good for Waterman's because, again, diversifying that risk, but also then raising the capital that if this catastrophic event happens, they have the money on hand to pay out to their customers. So what do the investors get out of it? Well, for one thing, yield. It can be pretty high on these cat bonds, 5, 8%. That could be more money than you're making in other investments. And also the duration on these bonds tends to be a bit shorter, 3 to 5 years. So you're getting your money back plus that interest in a short amount of time. But there is, as with any investment, a bit of risk that comes along with this, right? So cat bonds are catastrophe specific. So if that earthquake happens, if that hurricane happens, if that bridge collapses, then the investor has to forfeit a portion, if not all, of the investment that they've made. So at the end of the day, they could find themselves without anything left. But again, a risk of investing in anything. Despite that, though, the model has been really popular since it was sort of born out of Hurricane Andrew back in 1992. So you see that in 1997, the ILS market here, pretty nascent, there's not much going on. Over the past 20 years, it has grown into a $103 billion market. And Bermuda, well, it's really at the epicenter of what's going on here. So at the end of the first quarter of this year, you can see that issuance here outstanding, 75% in Bermuda. The money keeps rolling in, but there's more and more competition in the market now, right? You see other financial hubs that are saying, hey, we want a slice of this action, and they are starting to form strategies to get in on this. There's also this question about what does this actually mean for the local market, for the local economy? We've got two great guests joining us tonight to help us answer those questions. Greg Wojciechowski, the president and CEO of the BSX, and also Kathleen Ferries, head of Bermuda for Tokyo Millennium Re, although both of you guys are here tonight in your capacity under ILS Bermuda chair and deputy chair. I got that right?
That's right, Toni.
All right, Greg. I want to start things off with you because we've seen this exponential growth in the ILS market in the past 20 years. What specifically, very briefly, what specifically has Bermuda done? What's been its role?
I think Bermuda's done what it's done really well all along. So Bermuda, most people know, is the world's risk capital. So it's really well educated, well steeped in insurance experience. And back in the mid-2000s, this was just an evolutionary type of mechanism that started happening in the industry. And Bermuda was well poised to actually see what was happening and take advantage of that. So I think it was really just leveraging the experience and the longevity and understanding of the markets that really put Bermuda right in the center of it all.
So Kathleen, ILS really comes as a form of alternative funding, capital raising. How mainstream, though, has it become over the past 20 years when companies are looking to diversify their risk? Is this something that's increasingly becoming the option?
Absolutely. And I think, especially from my own perspective, now being in the space for about 10 years, it's been really interesting to see the investors themselves. So you mentioned pension funds, sovereign wealth, and other institutional investors. The process of them getting educated around this asset class has been fast and it's been vigorous. But they are now very sophisticated investors and do understand the space.
Increasing competition, we have Singapore, London, Guernsey. I mean, these places want to become ILS hubs as well. I noticed that just last month, Singapore launched the world's first commercial cyber risk pool that was expected to be backed by ILS. I mean, what does Bermuda need to do to be able to stay ahead of the curve here?
Well, Bermuda's it is ahead of the curve, and it's ahead of the curve because it has so many decades in the specialty reinsurance industry. And it has critical mass in the industry. So that's something that's going to be very hard to replicate. From our perspective, we're watching it carefully because what we need to do is not so much react to the competition, but make sure that we're fully aware of what the market's requirements are of the space, and that we, as a platform for ILS, can continue to evolve and meet the needs of our clients in a well-regulated, well-respected fashion.
When you talk about evolution, where do you see it evolving? Is it about new products?
Yeah, I think that what we're looking at right now is a lot of different diversification of the risk that's being transferred. So, it's very exciting where this can go. The capital markets are very, very interested in this product. And if the insurance industry can continue to keep inventing itself and diversifying risk into new types of structures, then it can continue to develop.
Go ahead.
I think it's product, but it's also the asset managers themselves are evolving. So we're seeing now currently some of those asset managers that manage these investors are actually looking to set up their own Class 3 reinsurance companies. And they're looking to do that in Bermuda. One, because Bermuda has credibility, Solvency II is very important. So they're looking for this robust regulatory environment and credibility to start up these reinsurers, and they're doing it in Bermuda.
What's the tangible benefit for the average person on the street?
I think we're continuing to stay at the forefront of where reinsurance, insurance is going and evolving to. These asset managers that invest in insurance and reinsurance and cat bonds, they were considered the innovators. I think it's great that Bermuda now is expanding that to technology, right? We want to be that incubator, not just for reinsurance, but for other businesses as well, and then collaborate.
But to the man on the street, perhaps could it be the more diversified sources of capital coming in, it helps keep rates at a point where it might be more affordable or provide more coverage to people that are buying, whether it's homeowners or something like that, because it just it opens up the universe for more coverage, doesn't it?
Right. The capital that came in over the last 5 to 10 years has definitely changed the market. It's evolved the market. Pricing is different. People think about, we don't have the cycles that we used to. So it's what they call now a flat cycle. So where it used to be you would have these big catastrophes, the market would have this huge uptick, which would mean that insurance companies and buyers of that coverage would see higher rates. Now you don't see those cycles like we used to, which is much better for homeowners, for insurers, for everybody that has risk.
Now, in terms of jobs, the BDA put out an impact study a few years ago and showing that the ILS industry had created 400 jobs in Bermuda by the end of 2015. So we're 3 years on from that. Are we still seeing that type of growth, do you know, in terms of the impact on the economy, in terms of jobs and payroll?
You know, anecdotally, because we don't have the most recent numbers, but one would think that yes, that continues. I mean, one of the things that was very important when the ILS market started to really heat up was it refocused attention on Bermuda and kind of our ability to be innovative and react, and it actually retain jobs and help reinvent the market. So it's been a very positive thing overall for the domestic economy.
Bermuda accounts for about 75% of the outstanding volume. We do see this competition coming in. I mean, if it drops to 50%, is that still an acceptable place to be?
I mean, we have to be vigilant, right? I mean, we worked hard, and Greg knows because the BSX was a big part of that. We worked hard to bring that back to Bermuda, but we have to be vigilant. We have to remain nimble in terms of how we're interacting with business, and we have to be consultative. We have to be in that discussion together on how we can continue to compete.
But we also need to be kind of forward-thinking on this, because one of the things that the Bermuda platform does really well is it's experience. So it has a lot to offer those jurisdictions that are starting to expand. And the way that we look at this is competition isn't necessarily a bad thing. It might actually grow the pie, and it might provide new opportunities for Bermuda to actually get involved with other regions, which we don't necessarily have that nexus to right now. So whilst we can look at it in terms of maybe being protective, we can't do that. We have to look at it in terms of responding to kind of a growing part of the industry.
There are a lot of places in the world, developed nations and developing nations, where there is a gap when it comes to protection. There's low either insurance penetration or there's underinsurance. What role do you see ILS playing in closing that protection gap? Large. Yeah, I mean, it's flood coverage is a really good example. There's a huge protection gap there. We've seen it. Everybody's seen it in the news, right? So Houston and some of the other events that have happened, very low penetration in terms of the amount of coverage that was provided for that catastrophe. ILS has already said they want to step up. They just need to be able to understand that risk like they do maybe hurricane risk. But that's happening and it's evolving. Cyber is is another example where they're getting educated. The models, the ways that we measure that risk that are very robust in the property cat and hurricane, that's now evolving with cyber and flood as well. When it comes to losses, obviously you're talking about Harvey, when we're talking about the Houston area from last year, the flooding and the amount of damage and the billions and billions of dollars in damages. I mean, ILS is a fairly risky thing to be jumping into. I mean, we had the Swiss Railway pension fund took a loss of about 9% on ILS last year. We had the Dutch health pension provider a 13.3% loss from its ILS portfolio. Do you think that's going to limit the ability for the ILS market to grow because it is a riskier investment?
Shall I take so one of the things I think is important, I think you led with this, is that it's an investment. Like any investment, I think investors need to assess their risk assessment and what they're able to take. But this is not really a retail level type security as yet. And one of the things that I think ILS does provide is a portfolio manager with a very interesting risk diversification strategy. So they have huge portfolios that are invested across a wide range of different assets. And this is something that the ILS is something that is really interesting because it has very low correlation to the broader capital markets. And I think portfolio managers do like that. So years ago, we did talk about sticky capital. If something happened, would the capital markets investors that came in new, would they get concerned and leave? And I think it was over the last couple of years, it's been proven that they're here and they see this as a new asset class and they're really watching it evolve and they're learning more about it. So they understand the risks better and better.
I mean, it's not correlated, as you mentioned, with the markets overall. But I mean, what about for interest rates? Because they're going up. I mean, at least the United States interest rates are going up. And usually you have bond prices and interest rates have this inverse relationship. As one goes up, the other one goes down. Does this impact ILS the same way?
If there's an investment that they can get a similar return on, right? So again, everything's relative.
Right.
And typically for a pension fund, the allocation that they make to this space is typically relatively small to their overall portfolio, right? So yes, definitely, if other investments emerge that they can make a better return, they're just like us, right? You're going to go to where you can make a better return. But we don't anticipate that happening, right?
No,
Anytime soon.
We don't, and it'll be a competitive force of investment as well. So as those interest rates rise, and if there's other investments that can get a similar yield, then that'll be part of the investment decision in the portfolio. But the lack of correlation is a really interesting and compelling kind of story in relation to the portfolio management side of it.
Yeah, because it's catastrophe, specific, as opposed to whatever else is floating around. Just very quickly, numbers being thrown around on where this could be headed. I saw one recently, $300 billion market. What's your best estimate in the next 5 years?
There's a huge protection gap. I mean, you mentioned it, right? So I mean, there's a lot of places where this could grow significantly, and we're hoping that Bermuda is at the center of it.
Yeah, I mean, the challenge really is the capital markets are interested. They're starting to understand the market better in an educated way. The insurance industry has to continue to keep, finding ways to expand that diversification of the risk that's offered and transferred into the capital markets. And I think you're right. The protection gap is going to be a real impetus for the continued reach into the capital market. So it's all about structuring the right products and getting it to market.
We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you both for joining me this evening, Kathleen Ferris and Greg Wojciechowski. All right, time now for a quick break. But when we get back, massive swings, investor anxiety, trade tensions, and rising interest rates. Volatility has certainly returned to the markets. I speak to an expert who says, don't worry, we're just searching for the bottom. Stay with us.
New Toyota Rush, Bermuda's biggest SUV with 7 seats. There's always plenty of room. Available at Bermuda Motors.
From happy beginnings and life choices that we make along the way,
Colonial protects your lifestyle with the best insurance cover at the best possible price.
Health insurance with far-reaching benefits.
Family protection and long-term financial plans.
Business insurance and generous employee benefits.
For happy beginnings to happy ever after, visit CGIGroup.com.
Colonial, where people come first.
Welcome back to The Breakdown. Now, perhaps you've noticed that volatility has returned to the markets. It's not uncommon for there to be triple-digit swings in either direction, sometimes in both directions, on any given day. And it can give even those seasoned investors some whiplash. And the stocks, which carried markets higher over the past few years, you maybe have heard of them, those famous tech stocks, Facebook, Amazon, and Apple. Well, they are all getting pummeled. I caught up with Hilary Wakefield. He's the head of UK investments at EFG Asset Management, and he gave us his take on where the markets are headed.
Every time you go through a sharp correction like that, confidence needs to slowly build to try and find that bottom. And so with the market heading back down to 2,700, it's a process of trying to put in the low points there. And if we can hit those low points and then bounce, which I think which will happen, then I think there's a good chance that actually we're coming close to the worst we're seeing of this short-term correction. And we think it is just a short-term correction. I suspect it will be some more positive news on the trade negotiations with the Chinese. A visit from China, from one of their leading officials, that will be sufficient perhaps to build confidence that perhaps a deal will be possible. What is the world going to be like in 12 months' time? That's what we're investing for. So it's not about, we're all aware of the problems about Brexit, we're aware about the Trump-China issues, we're aware about the Italian issues. This is not new news. So what we're looking for is, what are the forward indicators telling us? So what is the Purchasing Managers Index telling us? What is the Small Business Optimism Index telling us, the NFIB? These indicators are all saying to us that actually economic growth is reasonably robust. It's okay. We're not about to go into recession. Optically, If you think that we're about to go into recession in 2020, then yes, you might argue these are quite expensive peak earnings. We don't think that's the case. Actually, we think equities will be quite reasonable next year. We'll have a good returns out of equities. Dollar remains, I think, reasonably firm for the time being, but we expect that to weaken off next year as the Fed goes on pause. If we get better news out of Brexit, and I think that we get a bit more certainty, then I think we can see the dollar bouncing 130. We could see that back up at 145. And that's kind of interesting because then for the UK equity market, that has very high levels of foreign exchange earnings. So with a stronger sterling, that'll be less positive for FTSE, but very good for the small cap and mid cap market. The majority investment strategies that our investors follow at EFG here in Bermuda tend to be on the more cautious side because we're about capital preservation and growing the assets at the right time. And I think when there is a certain amount of uncertainty around, people don't want to take the risk. But I think that for people who are investing for the 10 years, for the 20 years, for their children, for their grandchildren, taking a balanced mandate approach, let's say 50% bonds, 50% equities, particularly in dollars, that makes a lot of sense. I think for the sterling investors, life becomes a bit more complicated, and for the euro investors, even more complicated because bond yields are just so low and rates are so low.
Well, the market's certainly a lot more interesting after years of quiet, but as Hillary says, there are added complications. All right, let's take a look now at some other stories making headlines in tonight's Quick Take.
The lines have already started to form in the U.S. for the annual post-turkey shopping binge. Black Friday coming early again this year, with many merchants opening their doors at 6 p.m. on Thanksgiving.
Right after Thanksgiving dinner with my family, I think I'm just going to go over there, head over to Best Buy and see what I could do.
In Bermuda, some Hamilton shops are opting to extend their hours tonight. Gibbons Company will be open until 10 p.m., while Sports R Us will burn the midnight candle. If day shopping is more your thing, Black Friday deals can be had tomorrow at Phoenix, P-Tech, and Brown & Co. For a lot of retailers, Black Friday is the official kickoff to the holiday shopping season and a time when their books go back into the black. Have you always wanted to be a homeowner but struggled to come up with the cash? Well, you may want to think about moving to Japan. The government is starting a program to offload millions of abandoned homes on the outskirts of major cities. There were 8 million such properties back in 2013. They'll be given away for free or sold for peanuts. And if that's not enough to seal the deal, the government is also considering subsidizing renovation projects. Natural disasters and an aging population, the main reasons why the homes have been abandoned. It's one of the most recognizable buildings in the world, and its precarious lean makes for hilarious perspective photos. The Leaning Tower of Pisa, less leany than it used to be. Restoration work has straightened the monument by 4 centimeters over the past 2 decades. The 800-year-old tower was closed in 1990 on fears it was about to topple. A research group helped fortify it, and the tower's stability is now constantly monitored by internal sensors. More than 1 million tourists visit the Leaning Tower of Pisa every year. Staying in Italy now, a new virtual reality app is taking users thousands of years back in time. The Rome Reborn app recreates ancient Rome using digitally immersive technology. Stops on this tour include a virtual overview of the Colosseum where gladiators competed, the Pantheon, and the Imperial Forum.
Time now for a quick break, but when we get back, the race for space is no longer nation against nation. It is commercialized, company against company, and increasingly the latest playground for tech billionaires. That story in 2.
Win a trip or two to the 2019 Trinidad Carnival. When you purchase a car from Bermuda Motors, your name will be entered into a draw for a chance to win an all-expenses-paid trip for 2, including flights, accommodation, and tickets to the Trinidad Carnival. Visit Bermuda Motors on Church Street or bermudamotors.bm.
Out here, if you're unsure where the trail leads, you're on the right path. Go to Bermuda.com.
Ever wondered what smart health insurance feels like?
Colonial's 24/7 worldwide health insurance does most of the thinking for you.
1,500 CGI health claims are settled daily.
60% of claims settled automatically.
You can access your health plan almost anywhere, anytime.
And have smart wellness with online data tracking.
And more provider choices for you and the people who matter most.
Premier Health is smart health insurance, and it feels good.
Colonial, where people come first.
Welcome back to the program. Well, it has been nearly 50 years since man first walked on the moon. One small step for man, it really has become this giant leap for mankind. Space has become increasingly commercial, a $380 billion a year economy, which is no longer about proving one country superior to another, but the final frontier for some of the world's tech billionaires. And Bermuda, well, it has its own part to play in this latest version of the space race.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition. Liftoff.
Stage separation confirmed.
Launch has been initiated.
And we have liftoff of the NG-10 mission, taking Cygnus to the ISS.
We could potentially become a multi-planet civilization.
So I think one of the biggest potentials is in manufacturing. Manufacturing of possible drugs that you can't do here on Earth, manufacturing of exotic fibers like Z-blend materials or optical fibers, or organs on chips, or organs that could be grown in the microgravity and then completely and used to implant as replacement organs here on Earth.
Feathers are being removed right now. Is that correct, Moscow? Yes. And we attempt to stow them in DC-1. You will
Take the red tape off, let the private industry to be able to innovate amongst themselves to come up with new services, new products that maybe the government wouldn't have thought of on its own.
Back. That is the third trip to space and back for that rocket.
Well, what if you take that same ship and go from one place to another on Earth? You can get to most long-distance places, like I said, in less than half an hour.
Small nations like Bermuda, what sort of role can they play?
They can still do space things. Technology, there's been a huge innovation in technology in small sats, CubeSats, thin sats, I mean, you name it. There's been a whole revolution in being able to get access to space where you don't need to have multi-billion-dollar companies getting into space.
Engines are throttling up.
Well, that would certainly be quite the sight to see. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of The Breakdown. Thank you very much for joining me. If you missed part of the show or you just want to tell your friends to watch, The Breakdown does rebroadcast on Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. And you can also catch it on the Bermuda Broadcasting YouTube page. Feedback can be sent to me at the email below, and you can always find me on Twitter for your latest business updates, Toni Waterman _. We're going to be back same time, same place next week. I hope you'll join me. Take care.